Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to the Moderately Educated News Network. Today I'm joined by my lovely co-host, me, myself, and I. No, so today we'll just get a solo episode from me as I get to push my Democrat propaganda onto all of you, unimpeded. So yeah, it's my lifelong dream coming true. It's a beautiful thing. But anyway, guys, stick around. Today we'll be talking about the Festivus report for 2024, which is a report released yearly or annually by Rand Paul, a senator out of Kentucky, Republican senator out of Kentucky. Um, this report, I'll go ahead and read the intro to you. That way we get a decent idea of what it's going to be about, the contents of it, and then we can go into like specifics, nitty gritty, and have some opinions about government spending. But without further ado, we'll get right into it. So, the Festivus report. Um, Festivus being a Seinfeld holiday. Never watched the show. Correct me if I'm wrong. Here, but I believe the plot was somebody didn't want to celebrate Christmas for whatever reason, so they came up with their own fun holiday called Festivus. Is hence the name. So, this is his version of the Festivus report. But with that being said, last Festivus, we bemoaned the national debt nearing $34 trillion dollars. In just a year, Washington's career politicians and bureaucrats have managed to push it beyond 36 trillion, unsurprisingly, with hardly a second thought. Who's to blame for our national debt? Well, it's everybody. This year, members of both political parties in Congress voted for massive spending bills filled with subsidies for performing industries, um, continued aid, military aid to Ukraine, and controversial climate initiatives. I have a strong opinion about that sentence in particular, but we'll move on. As strong as Congress spends to reward its favorite pet projects, the American taxpayers are forced to pay through high prices and crippling interest rates. Um, we on average add 2.1 trillion dollars to the debt annually over the next decade, according to the July House Budget Committee report. Um, Holy moly, the US government will add over $6.4 billion dollars of debt every single day for the next 10 years, borrowing $268 million dollars every hour, $4.5 million dollars every minute, and $74,000 every second. Well, doesn't that sound like a fun career to have? I tell you. But in this Festivus report, I am highlighting a whopping 1 trillion 8,329,626.12, right? The over $1 trillion dollars in this report is highlighted as government waste. Things that range everywhere from ice skating drag queens to $12 million dollars spent on a Las Vegas pickleball complex, as well as $5 million dollars spent on Ukrainian influencers. Now, and can you believe the nerve that Congress has the gall, the gumption, the chutzpah to ask for a pay raise after already earning $174,000 a year and not receiving a pay raise since 2009, sorry, 2009. That being said, yeah, this is the state of our government. If you note, I'm working on this special software where I get to, take notes and write all over PDFs. These are my personal notes and some interesting things that I found. If you notice a bunch of crazy, chaotic handwriting, a lot of it's shorthand. A lot of it may not be like necessarily intuitive to interpret. Don't pay too much mind to it. But I can also elaborate on it. So, but anyway, I'll go back through some of these things. That being said, some of the things found in the report include ghost towns, the funding of ghost towns on the government's dime, pandemic plunder, fraud with COVID-19 stimulus. Let's see, pickleball complex building, Ukrainian influencer spending, snack attack, a $2 million grant to study kids looking at Facebook ads about food, a direct file failed, IRS creating a software tool where you can directly file with the IRS. This was seen as a failure. Um, Cirque the taxpayer, government funds allocated to the funding of arts and circuses in city parks. Girls just want to have fun. The Department of State DOS spent $3 million on girl-centered climate activism in Brazil. Let's see. When bailouts go bust, we'll talk about a $700 million pandemic era loan to one of the largest trucking companies, I believe the largest trucking company in the US. Let's see. Hashtag houndouts in Ethiopia. Who needs border security anyway? As we spent 2.1 million to ensure Paraguayan border security, but not our own. And many, many more. Those are just, I mean, as you can see, the list goes on, and these massive numbers associated with all these projects. Now, he highlights $1 trillion. We add up a majority of these. As I mentioned in the comment below, where you can see the asterisk, all of the listed items, the summation of them is about $180 billion, which is 20% of the claim listed above of 1 trillion. 180 billion for all of these products is less than Ukraine aid, which some may see as a waste. We can debate about that. I personally don't feel like supporting our allies and Ukraine and fighting for the sovereignty and internationally recognized borders is a waste of money. But to each their own. Not to mention, we don't send physical dollars to Ukraine. Most of that money is sent in the value of the armaments that are sent. So, important distinctions. Whatever. Not going to dive too much into the Ukraine debate here. Really just want to, clarifying some stuff. We'll get into the specifics now about the Festivus report. So, first claim made by Rand Paul is that the government is funding ghost towns. What do they mean by ghost towns? Here, it is all the money spent on maintaining, leasing, furnishing all the government buildings that are used for government workers to operate out of. Over $10 billion was spent on all the costs associated with these buildings. Excuse me. Now, it's worth noting that 17 out of the 24 offices or agencies that have offices report only using 25% of their space in 2023, and even the busiest offices barely reach 50% capacity. Now, these are important numbers because buildings are you shouldn't necessarily have capacity. Like let's say a building's capacity is 50,000, but the DOJ only has 10,000 employees. Of course, we're never going to reach capacity of a building. Now, I think a more accurate measure here, because there's ways that you can play tricks with statistics, probability, and percentages specifically if you don't interpret them correctly. Because a building's at 20% capacity, that may be a healthy level. That may be 100% of the workforce in there, but it's a very sparse workforce or too big of a building or things of that nature. So when you say that they're not at capacity, that's interesting that you're not using the percentage of the workforce that is present in said building. But that being said, capacity may also be important too, because if my entire work if 100% of my workforce is present inside of a building, but I'm only 1/5 of capacity, 20%, it may be worth considering downsizing to a smaller building and therefore saving money with leasing, maintaining, and furnishing this massive space. There are critiques to make, but interesting framing of the percentages. It's just small things like that you need to think about, be cognizant of. Why is the information being presented to me in this way? But that being said, another great thing to mention is COVID. COVID. Work from home. We were largely incentivized to work from home. My company itself still is having issues incentivizing or forcing people back to the office. Now that will change in 2025, but think how many years after the pandemic we are. And this affects private industry, this affects government, it affects contractors, it affects everybody that has the privilege of being able to work from home. Now people are saying like, hey, this is unacceptable. We're trying to reinvent, like we've got these massive office spaces. Come on, let's bring it in. Um, that is a better solution for this wasted money um, than than cutting funding. So I don't want you to think that when we mention this waste, think about a solution. Solutions for all of these is not to cut funding. A solution in this case would be force people back to the office. Hey, COVID's over, no longer a public health emergency. If you have some extenuating circumstances and have to work remote, we can talk about it on an individual basis, doing some holistic review. But largely, we're back in the office, baby. And that's what companies are doing, companies in both private industry and the government. But that being said, massive amount of spending identified by spending loss seen by Rand Paul. Now, $10 billion. Dollars. Also, I'd like to put this in perspective. $10 billion dollars to me and you sounds like a crap ton of money. And it is a crap ton of money. But in perspective, when it comes to government spending, $10 billion, dollars, crazy enough to say, is a drop in the bucket. Now, Rand Paul does go on in this report to identify the fact that drops do add up to make a puddle eventually, and eventually an ocean. But as I mentioned above, all everything here only adds up to about 20% of the claim of wasted money. And with that, again, that part is important because I feel that I can justify some of the wasted spending. But we'll move on. Pandemic plunder. A Florida man stole nearly $8 million dollars in federal COVID relief funds to buy a private island. Can you believe it? My goodness, the things that I would do with $8 million dollars. Make sure you guys buy your lottery tickets tonight. Texas got a $1 billion lotto drawn, and I'm praying I get to go buy this very island. But that being said, um, this was a massive fraud, right? These documents, let me see. The court documents illustrate brazen acts of deceit. 16 fraudulent applications for Paycheck Protection Program or PPP loans featuring fictitious employees and companies fabricated out of thin air. These documents outline a staggering $12 million dollars requested in PPP loan funds, which he managed to obtain $5 million dollars of. Unsatisfied with one illicit endeavor, he delved into economic injury disaster loans, EIDLs, raking in an extra $3 million dollars through deceptive applications. He just lied on the applications, y'all, which is a crime. And sad to say, due to auditing, due to whatever, he wasn't caught, and he wasn't denied funds necessarily in the moment, and this allowed him to amass $8 million dollars worth of fraudulent funds. He is currently he's currently serving 66 months in prison for his crimes. And I'm glad that they caught him. But how much COVID aid was fraudulently used, wasn't needed, wasn't, you know, um, so my question to you is, do we just not do aid? Do we have my belief is that we have a tighter auditing process. Maybe we're more stringent with the funds released. Maybe you need to demonstrate like more significant need, a certain level of need. Maybe we need to let more families suffer. I mean, it depends where your morals are at. It depends what level of suffering is appropriate for families. There's a lot of questions that go into that. Each one, I mean, you can kind of toil with it on an individual basis, but largely fraud does exist. Implementing more steps to see that it doesn't is will probably be a good thing, but with auditing, with efficiency programs, period, that requires an overhead. That requires an investment. So every dollar that we invest in auditing and oversight is a dollar less that you can spend on the project itself, on relief itself. And finding this level of a well-funded bureaucracy that can efficiently do its job while having enough funds, ample funds left over for our project is a very fine balance that we walk, not just in the government, but in any type of like private industry project or practice. It's a fine line and it's a balance like most things in life. But that being said, I would my comments here on the side, I would encourage stricter regulations, demonstrate more need for welfare, maybe smaller stimulus. Um, when paying individuals, right? Like our government stimmy checks, maybe it gets paid directly to our landlords instead of paid to us. That way we don't have discretion on how to spend it. It is meant to be spent for us for this explicit purpose, right? That doesn't sound fun. That doesn't sound great. But when you're getting a rent, something to help with rent or groceries or food, and then you go spend it on a down payment for a Hellcat, it's not necessarily, you're part of the problem. You are, but taking away that sovereignty from a citizen, I mean, that doesn't sound fun either. So, like I said, there's toils, there's issues each way you cut it. What sacrifices do we want to make for a more efficient system? How much autonomy do we want to sacrifice? I'm not here to recommend anything. I'm kind of going through it and giving my own personal opinion. Largely, hey, let's have a discussion. Let's debate about it. Let's figure out where we stand and what concessions we're willing to make to achieve the goals that we want. But that being said, yeah, let's see. Um, don't allow, oh, here's a cool idea. Don't allow dual enrollment of unemployment. So therefore, like if I'm unemployed and getting that, or if I'm getting disability, or if I'm getting X, Y, and Z, I cannot enroll in in another stimulus program or welfare program. Might be a solution. I'm not sure if that's already a thing, but that's something that popped into my mind. So tax dollars at play, baby. $12 million on a Las Vegas pickleball field. Now, crazy. Crazy work. I'll say this. Ohio did something similar. I believe this is somewhere in the report highlighted on this page. Do-do-do-do-do. I think he says it somewhere, but Ohio did something similar just with less money. This is a massive pickleball complex, as we can see from the aerial image above. But that being said, this was a this was justified during a let me see. Spotlight on a grant to bounce. Yeah. So it's to encourage healthy Americans, encourage more movement and activity as a senior funding program, promote public health and community engagement. Ohio did the same with funds that were allocated specifically for COVID. Um, Now you may ask, how can Ohio spend federal funds on a pickleball facility when it was expressly due for COVID? Well, COVID brought many unique challenges with lockdowns, with the mental anguish, the job loss, and isolation that was caused due to the pandemic. So that being said, one of the things that they cited and the reason they were able to justify this spending was public health. Was what's a game where we can conquer people's isolation, get them active, get them out of the house, but still socially distance. And pickleball as an up and coming game was seen as a good investment. And so with $12 million, again, seems like a lot of money. That is virtually nothing to the US government. Do I think Las Vegas needs as large of a pickleball infrastructure as it has? Probably not. Maybe it shouldn't have been 12 million, but largely, I don't think this is negligent spending. What you have to realize is government funds are allocated for a reason. And that reason at the time may be important. That reason at the time may be there's some sort of justification for it. So, what I feel like this report fails to do is consistently cite why we felt this was needed at the time. All of these on their surface do look somewhat ridiculous, but with further digging, with looking into the whys, with looking into the wording of the grant, we can realize, this is for public health and engagement. This is to take care of our seniors. This is the, you know, so I don't think that wouldn't necessarily say that this was a waste either. Taxpayers being funded for they're paying for a disinformation index. But the real news, but the real fake news is that this disinformation campaign is useful. Um, I'm sorry. Quickly, let me read my note in red regarding the previous project that we went over. Criticizing a project without context or intent is dishonest. I do feel like a large allocation may not be needed. More stringent standards for to receive federal funding and express, so like something stronger than just intent, but some sort of long-term justification, benefits reaped from it, stronger sense of justification to receive federal funding. That's appropriate. But to say that this is a complete waste and like we have no business doing this, the government allocates funds for a reason. Whether we agree with or don't agree with the reason, yeah, we could talk about it. As it pertains to disinformation, the State Department channels down taxpayer dollars into efforts silencing non-liberal and conservative voices. Through the National Endowment of Democracy, a private foundation, but is bankrolled by the State Department and the Global Engagement Center. $330,000 of your money was handed over to the GDI, the Global Disinformation Index. But it's bad enough the US government is wasting your money, but now they're also using it to undermine your freedom, Rand Paul cites. My thoughts on this. Disinformation needs to be nipped in the bud. Misinformation, nipped in the bud. We need to have, I would say, more investment in this because that is, I think to cite a previous Kremlin official, disinformation and the maladaptive, the fuck me. Misinformation and disinformation are essentially the pitfalls of democracy. This is the one way that we can really target democracy. Um, I do feel like conservatives engage in much more egregious, blatant, and intentional misinformation when compared to the Democratic counterparts. Largely, Democrats are cited for Hunter Biden and the Mueller report. Mueller report did find Russian interference in elections. Didn't necessarily find the collusion that we were looking for as it pertains to Trump, but did find connections between his team. That is, that's true. Whatever. Cool. Think what you think about that, whether that's right, whether that's wrong. Not here to judge that. But that's the level of misinformation we like Democrats engage in. And then Hunter Biden laptop. Oh, it's they're hiding it because they don't want to implicate Biden. Well, Biden was not implicated at all in those things. Senate committee found that he was non-impeachable for it. It wasn't a defense, so I don't know what more you want out of that, but that's our level of disinformation versus the Dominion voting machine lawsuit that Fox was knowingly lying about and engaged in, Rudy Giuliani falsifying evidence and lying on Ruby Freeman, January 6th and the lies and misinformation leading up and the questioning of the sanctity and security of U.S. elections. You see how these things are on different levels. Um, I don't think that conservatives and liberals or conservatives and Democrats are on the same playing field. We're not measured by the same rules. I think that's evident via the VP debate, um, which was hilarious when they asked Tim Walz, "Hey, did you lie about like when you were in China? Weren't you there like a couple months before or after?" And he was like, yeah, yeah, kind of." And then, that's a lie for Walls. They go ask JD Vance, did you call Trump Hitler? Do you deny the previous election results? Not only did he never own up, fess up, and answer the question, you see how those two questions are starkly different? Did you get your timeline wrong or intentionally manipulate it, whichever the case is, versus do you doubt the US democratic system? These two things are not comparable. So that's what I mean when I say things don't necessarily line up. We're not on equal playing fields there. The level of dishonesty that player A can engage in before they draw a penalty flag is way higher than player B. That's just kind of what I think. But anyway, disinformation needs to be stopped. I'll be honest, you probably do run into issues with the First Amendment there, especially with government intervention. But whether that's, I think having government funds to fund projects for private industry that does this, that can stop this growing problem, probably appropriate. Snack Attack, $2 million to see if kids like what they see on Facebook ads and if it incites them to eat more junk food. Um, Rand Paul says it's like we're paying to prove water is wet. Funny enough, we still had a debate about it. But anyway, that being said, um, one thing about science and one thing that these reports, these studies generate is justification. Experts then take this justification, these findings, to congressional hearings, to appropriate authorities who, guess what, create laws based on the findings. Maybe a law comes out of this that we cannot advertise certain food products to our youth because we want to, we want to promote healthy, able-bodied next generation. This may be something that is generated from this. And science is also, it's not one trial. Science is repeatable. It does its best to encompass a large sample size that's demonstrative of a larger population. One study does not do that, hence the need for additional studies. We don't let vaccines go out with one study. Why would we do the same? Why would we do the same? Uh, why wouldn't we do the same when we're potentially passing laws about a company a company's ability to advertise their products. Just saying. Taxpayer dollars down the drain. A hotel that is no longer a hotel. A grant was written that aims to preserve the historical features of the Bath Hotel and bring building up to safety standards so that it can be used for a museum or whatever. Now, it's worth noting that this renovation plan has been gathering dust since 2011 and is largely just kind of kicking the can down the road, not useful. It's $100,000. This is nothing. There's less than nothing to the federal government for one. But for two, I think it's worth noting that this same group of conservatives that will fight about maybe not conservative, Confederate ideologies of like the Confederate flag, Robert E. Lee monuments, Stonewall Jackson, like these historic things that are important to the history and fabric of our nation, what we once were. This same group that fights for these things, now they don't want to fund it. Now it's a waste of money. Now it's a problem. You have to pay to clean statues. You have to pay to maintain these things. Maybe not $100,000 worth, but I just think it's weird where we choose to lay our priorities at times. Do I feel like I don't have any history of the Bath Hotel? I don't know. $100,000 is less than it is a sprinkle in the fucking bucket. So I'm not my panties are not in a wad over $100,000 to preserve our history. So go for it. Direct file. Now, this is the first thing I will say. U.S. government had no business doing this. We already have TurboTax. The IRS created a tool to directly file, and we already have TurboTax. They spent $15 million on a task force to turn the IRS into an unholy force of tax preparing, filing, and auditing. Um, yeah, I don't see the purpose behind this tool, and if they wanted to create this tool, why create it from scratch? Maybe there might be some security concerns with like because private industry and the government do operate on different like security standards. But that being said, buy TurboTaxes. Like TurboTax is free for one. For two, pay TurboTax $15 million to use their tool and host it on your website. I don't know. It's or do something. This seems fucking stupid, to be honest with you. I do think that this was a waste of $15 million. Um, but we'll move on. The Health and Human Services Department spends $500,000 to determine if lonely rats like cocaine more than happy rats. Science, I will say this. Studies like this have been conducted before. Maybe it's not with these exact drugs. Maybe it's with some, there was additional analysis done. I didn't personally look into this study, but this study gave us valuable drug insights. Maybe there may be some novelty in the study and it's not just repeating. Maybe they scanned the rat's brain and determined X, Y, and Z. Um, I doubt that Rand Paul knows, and I don't know. So until somebody reads the report, which one day I will, it's not worth criticizing the study. Science also just needs to be repeatable. We need to know that the first study wasn't a fluke. So guess what? We repeat it. Um, it's also worth noting they probably restudied this, reinvestigated this issue because what happened? Lonely, starved rats. Who does that sound like? That sounds like the isolated people during the pandemic, where we saw drug use skyrocket, where we saw addictive personalities come out and drinking, like all these things, all these bad things associated with isolationism. This study directly correlates to the problems that we face in society today. I don't think that this was a waste of money. We go on and on. The DOE is revving up dollars. At the very top, Rand Paul mentions the fact that climate initiatives are sketchy at best and all this other goofy stuff. Um, Here, the Department of Energy pushes waste our taxpayer dollars to implement electric vehicles when 80% of Americans don't want them. Listen, you could argue that the largest problem facing the globe today is climate change. It makes sense to me. This is a problem that affects the young, the poor, the healthy, the old, maybe not so much the old, but this leads to severe weather events. It can lead to famine. It leads to global changes that affect everybody. We need to do our part to minimize our footprint and stop before we reach this precipice of that we can't come back from. Climate change is probably the greatest single threat to human existence, aside from us nuking each other. We got one planet. We got to make sure that we can continue to live here. Sad to say. We can't just go to Mars. I know Elon's trying to get us there, but this day, Um, so I don't think that, how much did you say? $15.5 billion dollars. I don't think that this was a waste of money to any s- uh, stretch of the imagination. $5 million on the Ukrainian influencers. Listen. So this went to Kiev, Ukrainian public affairs influencer staff. Now, on its surface, sounds goofy, but bringing creating military propaganda, create spending things on journalists, on especially because mainstream media isn't as heavily consumed nowadays. Many people do get their 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 news and things off Twitter or X, TikTok, and all these other various places, YouTube. Creating content that is digestible by the average person is important. Why? Because it sheds light, it pushes messages that you want pushed. At times, those can be detrimental, but when we're dealing with an invading force, drumming up support, getting people behind the idea that we need to continue to fund this, I think it's appropriate. I don't hate it. And again, $5 million drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of overall government spending. It's a drop in the bucket of Ukraine aid spent. I don't think that this $5 million is worth fighting about, to be honest with you. Cirque the taxpayer encourages the arts, the lost, the diminishing arts um, that we all love and appreciate. I just recently went to a circus. But that being said, it's important that we don't see these industries die because of lack of attendance, um, because of like a pandemic or something like that. Or yeah, it's important to not let certain arts die, I would say. Label me a conservative in that sense, but and you can make the argument sure that, well, if the public doesn't want it, doesn't demand it, maybe you should let it die. You can have that opinion and we can argue about it. But $365,000 to promote circuses, to encourage people to get out of the house during COVID, mental health, and further encouraging funding the most likely underfunded arts colleges and art and artistic performers. Probably a positive. Give these guys a little bit of a payday. Girls just want to have fun. No, they don't want to have fun. They want to have funds, God damn it. $3 million on growth-centered climate action in Brazil. Now, growth-centered, why are we bringing DEI to climate change? Well, because guess what? DEI is a net positive. We introduce different ideas from various backgrounds of people. Women are a great driving force behind that. More power to them. We encourage more women to get into STEM, science, and all these other things. And we're doing it in another country. You may ask why Brazil? Guess what? Brazil is home to the Amazon rainforest, the largest ecological area in the goddamn world. So it's not always necessarily intuitive of why we fund things in these areas. But the DEI aspect is positive. Good. Girls want to fight climate change? I'll give them all the power to do it. Awesome. Why in Brazil? Because we want to stop deforestation efforts and we want to preserve the largest ecological system that we have on the face of this planet. Um, which may be key in preventing climate change. So, yeah. And then an example I come up with is tampon manufacturer production could represent a significant, I don't know, addition to pollution, right? But having women on the board of decision makers and say, guys, no, that unfairly targets us, or yeah, we don't really need tampons. We have additional like sources for our cycles and tampons if they do contribute that negatively to our environment, then we can forfeit the, whatever. But having representation, different ideas, different viewpoints is essential. Anyway, I have 2 minutes left. All of this adds up for only 20% of the alleged $1 trillion. Where does it all go? Where does the other 80% of the claim come from? It comes from interest on our debt. That's wasteful government spending. That's why we need to rein in the budget. We need to create a surplus and we need to start chipping away at that debt because he highlights all these things and puts interest all the way down here and hides it in the middle to make it sound like, oh, we're wasting money on all these other bullshit programs. No, this is the largest source of our wasted spending, seemingly. Attack that. That's the real root of your problem. That's what you need to solve. With that being said, guys, I am out of time. Feel free to read the Festivus report. If I said anything that you agree with, disagree with, let me know. Um, don't forget to like, subscribe, share the video, and yeah, let me know if you want to keep getting like Democrat propaganda from me on my lonesome. I'd be more than happy to keep pushing it. Sometimes it's nice to have not have your ideas combated. But anyway, that being said, you guys take it easy, and I will talk to you later. Pieces.